Okay, the title of this is going to be The Spiritual Side of 9/11. Please subscribe, like, and share if you would. I want to show you right off the bat the thing that got me on 9/11 was Building 7 falling. So here's Building 7 falling. The very first time I saw this, I knew that there was a controlled demolition charge on Building 7. Now you're going to see several different angles of it. Building 7 was hit by no plane. It had no jet fuel spilled on it. It was barely on fire. Yet later on they admit that they pulled it, which is a term meaning they demolished the building. Well, it takes weeks to set the charges. Well, who were the tenants of Building 7? They were Citibank, and the CIA had a building there, and I'm going to turn that off. And the CIA had a building there, and Barbara Boxer was under investigation by the SEC at the time, and all the records were in that building. If you'll also remember, Donald Rumsfeld was being pressured that there was $1 trillion missing from the defense budget, and those records were also in there. The main people that were the renters of that building were Citigroup, but there was also Secret Service had an office there, the CIA had an office there, and any of those people would have had access to the core columns, which would have brought down the demolition. Another thing that got me right off the bat, if you saw the molten steel for days afterwards, there you can't have all the jet fuel, which actually burns weaker than gasoline. It burns weaker than regular gas. Check it out. There was still hot spots for days and even weeks afterward where there was molten steel, and that was because of the thermite and thermate that had not initially gone off, but was ignited later on and kept the steel in molten state. Several books that I read in preparation for this was David Icke's Alice in Wonderland, the World Trade Center. The main one was Jonathan Cahn's The Harbinger, the 9/11 Commission Report, and the Popular Mechanics article that backed the official view of what happened, but it happened to be written by a man named Chertoff, and he was the cousin of the second head of Homeland Security, Michael Chertoff. Of all the people they could get to write an article for Popular Mechanics, they couldn't get somebody that wasn't involved. So like I said, the major book for this is going to be from Jonathan Cahn's The Harbinger, and I'm going to go into what happened kind of on the spiritual level with it. But first, let's do some let's go over some stuff here that a lot of people don't know. So the very first capital of the United States was New York City, and before they had the first inaugural speech for the country, they went and said a prayer in the church that's right there at the corner of the 9/11 property. It's the Episcopal Church. It's been there 300 plus years, and that church made it through the collapse of the buildings, and that's going to be very germane to the rest of the topic. There was a sycamore tree, an American sycamore tree was destroyed by the church. It was right by the church, but it absorbed all the falling debris, and nothing happened to the church. Now, what happened at that church? So the very first act of the country as a government was they went and they had a prayer at that church, and then they went in the back, walked out the back of the building, a couple hundred yards, and then George Washington gave his inaugural speech, the dedication of the country to God, and his inaugural speech. And that was basically right in the middle of the Twin Towers. So ground zero was the place that Washington gave his inaugural speech. Now, Jonathan Cahn's book brings in some stuff that I had heard pretty much immediately after it happened. If you look what was said afterward, for a couple of years later, God is replaying Isaiah 9 and 10, where in modern times with this, and the politicians were writing the same words in the Bible, but instead of the ancient Israelis were talking about the temple, and the modern politicians are talking about the World Trade Center. The Israelis replaced the cedars of Lebanon around the rebuilt temple after boasting we'll rebuild it and make it higher and stronger. And a pine tree was flown in to replace the fallen sycamore in front of the church instead of a cedar of Lebanon. It's the same word that you would... there's only 6,000 words in ancient Hebrew, and you have to use the context of the sentence. So an evergreen, a cedar of Lebanon would be identified as an evergreen tree. So here's some of the reasons that, like I said, you can believe that the powers that be, you can call them the deep state, the Illuminati, they're all Satan's foot soldiers. So building 7. Oh, by the way, George Bush's younger brother, Marvin Bush, worked for SecureTech, which was running the security for the World Trade Center and one of the airports where the supposed hijackers got it. And his mom mentions it in one book, and she goes, "Oh yeah, it was a happy coincidence. He quit working at the World Trade Center the day before it happened." Also, the Pentagon is one of the heaviest monitored buildings in the world, and there's only one brief film, and it looks like a missile's hitting it. All the rest of the film was taken up, or the cameras were turned off. Phil Silverman, the guy that owns the World Trade Center complex, took out $10 billion of insurance. Like I said, Building 7 housed the Secret Service, the CIA, and the Citicorp, which was, who knows how many people were being protected from that, but there was a lot of Democrats as well, since both sides whitewashed it underneath the 9/11 Commission report. Nobody said anything. Like I said, the molten steel, the core columns. So if you look at aerial shots, the core columns are cut, and that's how you make a building slide off into itself. And they do admit to pulling Building 7. And at the same time, NORAD was running a exercise where planes were being flown into buildings, and they were responding. That's why they couldn't get anyone to respond to all these planes that were going on. If you'll remember, when Payne Stewart, his plane, everybody died in it. They had because of carbon monoxide poisoning, they had jets on it within 10 minutes. Well, they were having an exercise at the time, so they couldn't respond to it. And if you listen to one of the things, one of the tapes, you can hear one of the airport is asking the military for help, and they go, "Is this real world or is this exercise?" So that's why they couldn't respond to it. Now at the end, the last plane was shot down by Air Force National Guard pilot. That crash you saw in that field, there was no debris, there was no, it just looked like a freshly tilled field, and there was guys wandering around it. If you ever see a plane crash, there's always chairs and pieces of debris. That just looked like a freshly tilled field. So here's the replacement tree that they put at ground zero. They flew it in, and the sycamore was cut down, and it was bronzed. The as it was cut down, then these are all the roots, and they put it at Wall Street. Well, what they initially were going to do was they were going to make into what's an occult thing called a nematon. I'm not going to go into any more of that. But a lot of stuff was said that replays Isaiah. And the Bible has a thing about 3 witnesses have to bear witness to a truth. And here's one of the things in Isaiah. We will rebuild with hewn stone the sycamores have cut down, and we will plant cedars in their place. So the 3 witnesses are Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle, and then the second one is John Edwards, and they say we will rebuild and make it stronger. And then Barack Obama says it right after he became president. We will rebuild, we will emerge stronger than ever. One can find this very rendering in Bible commentaries of Isaiah 9 through 10. So, if you haven't figured it out, the people that run the world are devil worshippers, and you can do both sides were in on it, the Republicans, the Democrats. One thing you need to realize at the upper levels are the same people. The economic calamities that happened on that day. There's another work by this man, Jonathan Cahn, called The Shemitah. I recommend you read that too, along with the Harbinger. And so we're coming up on the anniversary of 9/11. I don't know if anybody even cares anymore, but anyway, this is my thing to point you into further study. Thank you, I'm out.